Would like to introduce you to our next speaker, Dennis Downs. His work with trail marker trees has been remarkable over the years. I am honored, we are honored that we're able to use that as a logo because it does symbolize a journey that one takes down this entrepreneurial road, and these trail marker trees were able to point out the different ways or different things to see, things to look out for. So I want to thank him for allowing us to doing that. But really want to thank him for being a friend and supporter of the Native American community. It's something here, we're an oral community, and the history and connection with the trail marker trees grew kind of fuzzy over the number of years. Dennis has really been able to research, document, and authenticate the connections with these types of trees to the natives and up through today. So these were used throughout the United States, and Dennis, by George, has traveled throughout the United States, all on his own, sounds correct, all on his own dime. This is something that he does because he is dedicated to it and passionate about the trail marker trees and authenticating these. I was very fortunate. I went with a trip with Dennis and Gail over into Iowa and was able to go into, boy, I mean, it felt like a cathedral because there were very, very many of these trees there. You don't see too many around now, but boy, when you go into a grove where these were created and shaped and they're still there is truly amazing and awe-inspiring, and I have to thank Dennis for allowing me to be there with him, and Gail too. Gail is such a part of all of this. So it is. So he's going to talk a bit more about this, and actually the connection to your community too. So it's not just all around the United States, but directly here in your backyard. So it is with warm affection and appreciation, I'd like to introduce Dennis Downs.
Thank you, Andrew. This is Gail Spring, my wife. First of all, how many of you actually know or have ever heard about Native American trail marker trees? Okay, so that's a pretty sizable amount of the crowd. Something that my wife reminds me of constantly when I'm doing lectures, everybody doesn't know what you know, Dennis. So I'm going to just give you, for the people who don't know what these were used for, the trail marker trees were not to point out the main trails. They were to bring the Native Americans to things that were important in their everyday life. Things like exposed copper deposits, chert deposits, viscous glasses that were used to make weapons, to make tools, to make adornments, hard rock river bottom crossing areas, portage routes. These things would be incredibly important to the way of life of the Native Americans, especially in the Great Lakes region. As Andrew said, I've traveled the whole United States, documenting these. I've been to 41 states, 5 provinces, gone through 3 Ford pickup trucks, putting 200 to 300,000 miles on each one over 40 years. But in the West, you've got your pictographs, you've got your petroglyphs. In the subarctic, you've got your Inukshuk system, your stacked stones. The Native Americans in our area needed to pick something that had a long-lasting ability that they could manipulate to know it was shaped by the hand of man. So when you're looking at a trail marker tree, this is the branch. This is the trunk. The original trunk was removed after about 10 years in the shaping of it. This tells you this is not deformed by nature. It's not accidental. It's an ingenious form of land and water navigation, specifically to our area. This particular sculpture, that photograph, the large one over on the side, and the one next to it, that is the Lake Forest trail marker tree. Without me learning about that trail marker tree, when I was in the late 80s, my study would have stopped. but because Northwestern graduate in botany, Raymond Jansen, spent 10, and he also worked at the Field Museum in the Native American section for 11 years. This is the 20s and 30s. When I saw that he had dedicated his life up to that point documenting these in 13 states over a 10-year period, I decided I was going to go everywhere Raymond went. I didn't know how difficult that would be. After 10 years, I'd accomplished that. 28, in a total of 28 years from the start point, I wrote the book on Native American trail marker trees marking paths through the wilderness over a decade ago. This is the lake forest tree. That's the lake forest tree. The cover of my book is the lake forest tree. It's not insignificant to me. And to be back here doing an event with, I know Kim shortly because she just moved to the area. Andrew, 25 events. He was being shy about one trip. Susan Kelsey was involved in my events early on. I wrote part of her forward to her book, did posters for her promotion of her movie, and I'm in her film. This isn't some little thing for me. And to have the event held within 500 feet of where the actual Lake Forest trail marker tree stood is unbelievable to me. So 40 years later, I'm basically doing a presentation on Lake Forest tree. All the suburbs worked with me over the years. Lake Bluff is represented here specifically in that note, but Deerfield, Glencoe, Winnetka, Wilmette. My research is based on fact. It's based on photographic evidence. It's based on bronze plaques. It's based on Native American influence. I have met and worked with all the tribes that Andrew mentioned and many more over 40 years. And to sum this up in the importance of the trail trees to our area, a quote I used in an address to the National DAR, but specifically the Native American Committee asked me to do a national talk by video, Vimeo, whatever you call it, an 18-minute presentation that went to 3,000 chapters across the United States last year. And in that presentation, there's a quote that I'd like my wife Gail to read.
And I would just like to add that Jens Jensen was very much a proponent as well, the landscape architect. And actually, as early as the early 1900s, he was down at the Blackstone Hotel in Chicago doing talks on the trail marker trees. So this does go way back. And so it is great that Dennis has picked up this torch and carried it on and has taught people throughout the country about what a great resource that the Native Americans had used. It's such a great part of history. We are so happy that it is that the history of it is continuing and will not be forgotten. But this is the quote from 1912 from the National Daughters of the American Revolution at their 21st Congress. The history of the Indian trail trees of the North Shore of Chicago has been known and handed down to the 3 generations of early and present American white residents of Chicago and suburbs, from the Indians themselves, who lived around here until 1836 in large numbers. And when they immigrated west of the Mississippi, a few stayed here for 20 years or more. So the location and purpose of these Indian trail trees is as much a part of our local history as Fort Dearborn or any other landmark. So you can tell how important these were to the Native Americans, and we are so happy to keep this history alive for the future.
Getting back to influence and background on history with Native Americans, my card-carrying aunt, Cherokee, so Andrew, Little Dove, is the one who inspired or ignited. She always yelled at me about, I'm part Basque as well. Our people are in Idaho in the mountains. My art was influenced more and research about that area. And when my aunt would visit and spend a great deal of time with me, she'd say, Dennis, focus on the Great Lakes area. It's so underrepresented. We, as Native Americans, talk about your area as one of the most beautiful places in the United States. You have every resource available that you could think of, from the trees, from the fish, from the flyways, from the building materials. There isn't anything you could want that doesn't exist in our area, and specifically in the region that a lot of you have grown up in. I'd like to thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Andrew, Kim, Betsy. Extraordinary. Thank you all for that. And Gail, thank you very, very much.